There is only so much you can do yourself with your own money, with your own equity, especially when you start out with nothing. Use debt intelligently. Debt is like fire. It can be dangerous, it can burn things down, but think about fire as a tool, and with the knowledge of finance and how you can leverage it for your own life and your own planning. I wanted to share lessons that I wish I knew, that I wish my parents knew 10, 20 years ago. Growing up, my parents never used any debt. They weren't a fan of debt, but because they never really thought about finances in a way that is structured, in a way that is analytical, they missed out on many opportunities, whether it was the real estate boom over the last 20 years, whether it's the equity booms ever since 2000. All of these investing decisions and the worry and the reluctance to use any debt prevented them from capitalizing in the American dream. So here are some lessons to make sure that you don't fall into the same trap. Here's the first one. Use low interest debt to buy assets. Income producing, cash flow producing assets. That is the number one lesson I wish I knew 10 years ago. There is only so much you can do yourself with your own money, with your own equity, especially when you start out with nothing. When you start by working at a job, making a salary, making a wage, and eventually what you need to do is to borrow money at a low interest rate and invest it. Anything that will hold its value and make you money. Eventually, at some point in your career, you should be in a good place cash flow wise, as long as you manage your spend wisely and you do well in your career and investments. Cash flow should become less and less of an issue over your first 5 to 10 years in your career. If that is the case, what you should really be doing is purchasing income generating property. Notice I didn't say cash flow generating property. Yes, cash flow is king, and ideally if you can find cash flow generating investments, you should do that. However, don't shy away from income generating property that sometimes it might not cash flow. These deals are usually overlooked, especially if you leverage debt properly. What you can do is convert your cash flow that you have into income generating, i.e. through debt. A portion of your payments go towards principal and a portion of your payments go towards interest. Your principal amount actually builds up equity for you over time. And in loans, how that works is your payments gradually go more and more and more over time towards your principal, which in turn is your equity. This is a super important lesson for you, whether you're investing into properties, investing into businesses. It is the equity that is truly most important. You can have a lot of assets, you can have a lot of cash flow, but if you are still drowning in debt that is not going down, that is a big, big problem. Here's another thing related to debt. If you borrow money at today's cost and today's value, over time, there's inflation, and your income generating or cash flow generating asset should, and you have to be very careful about picking what investments you buy, over time, you should have a growing earning power, i.e. you should be making more money with inflation. However, your debt is linked to today. It is linked to how much the value of money is today. And as you know, with inflation, money over time loses its value. So if you're borrowing money at a 3% interest rate, but inflation is 3%, in 5 years' time, you're essentially not paying any real interest. Here's my favorite, and maybe it's not always the best mathematically, but it absolutely protects you. And this one is always use fixed interest rates when it comes to debt. When you get something with a low fixed interest rate, it protects you from any economic shock. Like for example, after COVID, central banks instantly raised rates because of inflation. And those in variable rate loans, whether it's mortgages or other debt, all of a sudden you saw your payments either shoot through the roof or your principal portion of your payments went to zero. And that would create situations where sometimes your mortgage payment didn't even cover the interest and your loan amount actually kept increasing. Versus if you have fixed rate mortgages, it protects you from that shock. And the lesson here is make sure you protect yourself. You do all of your calculations and all of your planning based off of that fixed rate. Make sure you don't overstretch yourself compared to that, especially for debt that has terms where you have to renew it or roll it over and the interest rate changes. That is what you also have to be very prepared and very careful about. If you can protect yourself from these things, you can use debt very, very wisely.